Okay, today we're going to look at the two covenants. This is not the old versus the new covenant, but these are the two covenants dealing with Abraham and the result of lack of faith with God's plan, and what happens when we try to intervene and override God's plan. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the definition of a covenant. And this is from your dictionary.com. The promise made by God to humanity in the relationship it established as described in the Bible. In the Bible, a divine promise establishing or modifying God's relationship to humanity or to a particular group. A binding agreement. So we're going to look at, first of all, we're going to look at this here. This here is a covenant. It's God's promise not to send a flood. This is just an example of one of his covenants. Okay, we're going to start out in the New Testament. And after we go and look at what's in the New Testament, we're going to go back and look at where it's talking about in the New Testament, in the Old Testament. Somebody wants to start reading this?
Violet?
Now, excuse me. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all, but is under the tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of the time has come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because ye are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore, thou art no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then heir of God through Christ.
Now, a lot of people will go and they'll start later in Galatians 4. But you see, I wanted to get this here because this here will show you, will give an explanation, a correct explanation, not a wrong explanation like a lot of people get of later in this chapter. As you see in verse 2, it says the time appointed. That's a moed. And you see, man has tried to change that many times. And in verse 4, it says, God sent forth his Son made under the law. This was dealing with a relationship. Also, we find in verse 6, because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of Son unto your hearts. See, this is what the new covenant is. It's supposed to have the Holy Spirit write the new covenant in our hearts. And when this happens, then we have an inheritance. And that is in verse 7, then we are heir to God through Christ. We are not a servant anymore, but we are a free person, which we will talk about next. Now, continuing.
Howbeit then, when ye knew not God, ye did service unto them which by nature are no gods. But now, after that ye have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage? Ye observe days, months, times, and years. Am I therefore your enemy because I tell you the truth?
You see in verse 8, there is no gods. Actually, that deals with an inheritance. because the servants don't get the inheritance. And this is why that we should not be in bondage. And then it goes, ye observe days, months, and times and years. That is in bondage, not in freedom. But you see, when you come out and talk about this stuff, when you go down to verse 13, you get in trouble. They classify you as an enemy. And why? Because you're telling the truth. Because there's so many people today that don't want the truth because they feel it doesn't set them free. A lot of people choose to be in this bondage. Okay, continuing on.
Tell me, excuse me, tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through promise. Now this may be interpreted allegedly, these women are 2 covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now Hagar is Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother.
So there's 2 covenants. In verse 24, we see there's 2 different covenants. One is a slave, and one is through a promise. And you see this here is in Galatians. We're going to go and look in the Old Testament in Genesis, and we're going to go through these 2 covenants and exactly what happened in these 2 covenants and why these 2 covenants became at war against each other.
Barbara, you're next. We skipped you accidentally.
Okay, continuing.
Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through pleasure. Oh, promise.
And I repeated this here because do you not listen to the law? And you see, a lot of us, a lot of people today, they try to ignore the law. They want feelings. And we're going to show what happens when you have feelings and these other things.
Yeah.
When that enters into it. Let's see, let's go and continue in this chapter.
For it is written, rejoice, O barren one who does not bear. Break forth and cry aloud, you who are not in labor. For the children of the desolate one will be more than those of the one who has a husband. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so also it is now. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. So, brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman.
Okay.
So here Paul he does not separate them. He separates them, but then brings them together, which is what we will see happen in Genesis. But see, we cannot go and cast out the slave woman. And you see that there, basically what he was doing was recapping what had happened. So let's go back to Genesis 9 and let's look at this covenant.
Okay. Sandy's team. One of the 3 of you.
And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is a token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth.
Now, looking at this covenant, is this covenant still in effect today?
Yes.
Sure it is. It's an everlasting covenant. So when we look at these other covenants, these other two covenants, we have to look at them. These covenants don't go away. These are a promise forever, and they are an everlasting covenant. So let's look at this covenant to Abraham.
The covenant that he made with Abraham, his sworn promise to Isaac, which he confirmed as a statute to Jacob as an everlasting covenant to Israel, saying, to whom I will give the land of Canaan as your portion for an inheritance.
So is this here?
I think
We
it's
see that this covenant between Abraham and God is also confirmed as a statute, and it's an everlasting covenant to Israel, and it deals with an inheritance. And if you look at the things between the Judean Christians and the Arabs today, this here problem still continues today. And it is also a statute. And we have talked a lot about some statutes here at Bible Explorations. Continuing.
Law to be written upon your heart. Galatians 4:19. My little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth, until Christ is formed in you.
So you see, when I went through this other before in Galatians 19, I came back to this here because this here is the covenant that the Christ is supposed to be written on our heart. His law is supposed to be written on our heart, and God's law is a reflection of His character. Okay, this is by Jeff Benner, and this is what I got online. If somebody wants to read it, it's about the two covenants between Sarah and Hagar.
The covenant of law is like the relationship between a master and the servant. God is the master, and those in this covenant relationship are servants to him and must obey him. If the servant disobeys, he is punished or executed. The covenant of love is like the relationship between a father and son. God is the father, and those in this covenant relationship are his sons. The father protects and provides for his son out of love, unconditionally. As the son grows, he begins to return to love by following in his father's footsteps. The servant's relationship with the master remains static, while the relationship between father and son grows.
Now you see the difference between a slave and a free man. The slave remains a slave, where the free one, it continues to grow. See, this covenant, it deals with relationships.
Well, the servant, Keith, it looks like obeys out of fear. He's going to be punished.
Yes, and that's why that relationship does not grow.
Right.
And you see, this is where Paul says we don't have two covenants. Everybody is in this one covenant if they chose to do. and that is to be the freeman.
Okay.
Okay, now let's go and look at the story between Sarah and Hagar.
And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast off this bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous to Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of the bondwoman, in all that Sarah hath said unto thee. Hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall the seed be called. And also the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is the seed.
There is a lot in here. You see this here, we will go back and forth and see this from different angles. But you can see here, Sarah and Hagar they're fighting. They're mocking each other, making fun of each other. Why? Because they both want the relationship with Abraham. See, it all comes down to Abraham. And you see in verse 11, it was grievous in Abraham's sight. And you see here in verse 12, and God said to Abraham, you need to listen to Sarah. And we will see that he did listen to Sarah. And because he did what he did when he listened to, that's one of the reasons he got in trouble. Because he did not because he ignored the covenant between him and God. And we will see that this promise was told to Abram many times, continuing.
And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is.
So Hagar, she was up against the wall, said, my child is going to die. What she's saying is that God's covenant is not going to come true, not what I've been told, because my child is not going to be the father of nations. And she put him in there to die. But guess what? God heard her. And then he said this to her.
Arise, lift up the lad and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation.
Now, why did God say, I'm going to make him a great nation? Why? Well, there's only one reason, and that is because Abraham is this child's father. Now, let's see what Mrs. White says about some of these things.
The Lord said of Noah and his family, who were saved in the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Noah had but one wife, and their united family discipline was blessed of God. Because Noah's sons were righteous, they were preserved in the ark with their righteous father. God has not sanctioned polygamy in a single instance. It was contrary to his will. He knew that the happiness of man would be destroyed by it.
So Abraham had a wife, Sarah. Was him having a child through Hagar, was that sanctioned by God? No, it was not. Why did that happen? Because Sarah's wife, or because Sarah, Abraham's wife, decided to take God's promise in her own hands and change it. Continuing.
And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. The word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir.
So he thinks that this is before Isaac is born. He believes that Ishmael was going to be his heir. Now, is that what he was told? No, that's not what he was told. Continuing.
Team BE, I think. Sandy? Oh, maybe they lost internet.
Had no son. He at first thought that his trusty servant Eliezer should become his son by adoption and his heir. But God informs Abram that his servant shall not be his son and heir, but that he should really have a son. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven and tell me the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be.
That's a promise. But did he believe it? No, he doubted it. See, this is once again that he was told these things. Continuing.
If Abraham and Sarah had waited in confiding faith for the fulfillment of the promise that they should have a son, much unhappiness would have been avoided. They believed that it would be just as God had promised, but could not believe that Sarah in her old age would have a son. Sarah suggested a plan. Thereby, she thought the promise of God could be fulfilled. She entreated Abraham to take Hagar as his wife.
Now,
Sometimes we have a tendency to try to help God out, don't we?
yeah. Now, when we've seen before that God went and told Abraham, you need to listen to his wife. So guess what? He did listen to his wife.
Yeah.
One time too many, I think.
Continuing.
In this, they both lacked faith and a perfect trust in the power of God. By hearkening to the voice of Sarah and taking Hagar as his wife, Abraham failed to endure the test of his faith in God's unlimited power and brought upon himself and upon Sarah much unhappiness. The Lord intended to prove the firm faith and reliance of Abram upon the promises he had made him.
So what should have happened? Abraham should have listened to his wife, Sarah. And when Sarah said, we're going to bring this woman, the servant, in here, and she's going to have a child, Abraham should have said, no, I have one wife, and we're going to go by what God said, that he will provide a child. But Abraham failed this test. How many tests have we failed? All the time. Speaking of myself. Continuing on.
Hagar was proud and boastful and carried herself haughtily before Sarah. She flattered herself that she was to be the mother of the great nation God had promised to make of Abraham. And Abraham was compelled to listen to complaints from Sarah in regard to the conduct of Hagar, charging Abraham with wrong in the matter.
Now, what would have happened if Abraham did not listen to the complaints of Sarah? I can tell you right now, there would have been more complaints. It would not have stopped. Continuing.
Abraham agreed and tells Sarah that Hagar is her servant and that she can have the control of her, but refuses to send her away, for she is to be the mother of his child through whom he thinks the promise is to be fulfilled.
And we see that Hagar was not the servant of Abraham, but Hagar was the servant of Sarah. Whoops. Continuing.
He informed Sarah that he should not have taken Hagar for his wife if it had not been her special request. Abraham was also compelled to listen to Hagar's complaints of abuse from Sarah. Abraham is in a perplexity. If he seeks to redress the wrongs of Hagar, he increases the jealousy and unhappiness of Sarah, his first and much loved wife. Hagar fled from the face of Sarah. An angel of God meets her and comforts her, and also reproves her for her haughty conduct in bidding her return to her mistress and submit herself under her hands.
Special request. And you see, so Abraham is listening to both of them go at each other. Boy, what a household. You see, they don't have, back then, I believe they had tents. They probably didn't have a whole bunch of rooms where he could go and hide. Continuing.
After the birth of Ishmael, the Lord manifested himself again to Abraham and said unto him, I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant. Again, the Lord repeated by his angel his promise to give Sarah a son, and that she should be a mother of many nations.
How many times was Abraham told? I don't know, but obviously it was more than once. But you see, this here is, whose covenant was this Abraham's covenant? No, this was God's covenant. And you see, when God makes a covenant, he always fulfills that covenant. And when he comes and tells us something, we ought to realize that he always does his part. The failure is always on our side. Continuing.
Abraham did not yet understand the promise of God. His mind immediately rests upon Ishmael, as though through him would come the many nations promise. And he exclaims in his affection for his son, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee.
See, he's still thinking that this is his, this is where the promise is going to come through, is through Ishmael. Continue.
Again, the promise is more definitely repeated to Abraham. Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. Angels are sent the second time to Abraham on their way to destroy Sodom, and they repeat the promise more distinctly that Sarah shall have a son.
Now you can see that this here battle came just before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, because this angel was on his way. He stopped there and repeated this covenant to him. Continuing.
After the birth of Isaac, the great joy manifested by Abraham and Sarah caused Hagar to be very jealous. Ishmael had been instructed by his mother that he was to be especially blessed of God as a son of Abraham, and to be the heir to that which was promised to him. Ishmael partook of his mother's feelings and was angry because of the joy manifested at the birth of Isaac.
See, there you can see Ishmael and Isaac angry at each other. And it all started with their mothers. We still see this same anger today. You go to over into the Arab countries, and they say, no, it's not Isaac. It was Ishmael that got this special blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So when this is an everlasting covenant, we're still dealing with these things today. The same thing. In fact, if you go over there into the Gaza Strip, the parents still today teach their sons to hate the Jews. That's the seeds of Isaac. Continuing on.
Sarah saw the disposition manifested by Ishmael against her son Isaac, and she was greatly moved. She related to Abraham the disrespectful conduct of Ishmael to her and to her son Isaac, and said to him, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac.
They're all trying to get the attention of Abraham.
Abraham was greatly distressed. Ishmael was his son, beloved by him. How can he send him away? He prays to God in great perplexity, for he knows not what course to take.
Yeah, he's at a loss. What would have happened if he just listened to God? Okay, there's also not just Isaac, but there was also a covenant with dealing with Ishmael. So let's read this.
The Lord informs Abraham through his angels to listen to the voice of Sarah, his wife, and that he should not let his affections for his son or for Hagar prevent his compliance with her wishes. For this was the only course he could pursue to restore harmony and happiness again to his family. Abraham has the consoling promise from the angel that Ishmael, although separated from his father's house, should not die, nor be forsaken of God, that he should be preserved because he was the son of Abraham. God also promised to make of Ishmael a great nation.
And so that there is kind of a comforting thing to Abraham, saying, yeah, your son, both of your sons are going to be blessed, but only one is under the covenant of the promise.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to bless both of them.
Well, you know what, Keith, I can relate to this exactly how Abraham feels, because I have a son of my blood. I have an adopted son. You know what? I love them both the same. People do not know the difference which one is which. I just love them both the same. I understand Abraham.
Yeah, especially when he's told that, and he believed that the first one was going to be the covenant. And I'm sure that he told Hagar that same thing many times.
Yeah.
Okay. Continuing.
I just read. Was it George?
Violet, if she's still there.
Is she? I don't know. I don't see her now.
She on? Okay, I'll read it. Abraham was of a noble, benevolent disposition, which was manifested in his pleading so earnestly for the people of Sodom. His strong spirit suffered much. He was bound with grief, and his paternal feelings were deeply moved as he sends away Hagar and his son Ishmael to wander as strangers in a strange land.
So when we see this next thing, when Abraham goes and pleads to God, see, he is still dealing with his wife and Sarah and Hagar over these two kids when he starts pleading for the people of Sodom. And we're going to go over just a little bit of this. And I'm not doing all of it, just some of it.
You know, there's another thing there that I read this week. I don't know if it's Jewish tradition or whatever, but when these three strangers come to Abraham's tent, 3 days before that, he had circumcised himself. So he was still in a lot of pain.
Oh, my.
Carol.
Okay, it's my turn. And
Yeah.
the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes.
And let's see here, and continuing.
And he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And Jehovah went his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham. And Abraham returned unto his place.
So this is the end of chapter 18, but we're going to go and read the first part of the next chapter.
And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them. And he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your way. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat.
So I have a question. If in the next day or two that Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, was they destroyed then during the Feast of Unleavened Bread?
Seems like it.
Because the other people are not going to be making unleavened bread.
Right.
I just have a question, you know.
Well,
Now,
unleavened bread is also quick, and they were in a hurry.
well, that's
I'm not
true.
The last day of the feast. And it could have been the last day of the feast. We don't know what
Yeah.
day of the feast it was.
Because
No,
Abraham,
we do
the
not.
3 guys had leavened bread also.
Yeah, and that's just a question that I had, you know. I just found that very interesting.
Yeah.
Continuing.
Angels are sent on missions of mercy to the children of God, to Abraham with promises of blessing, to the gates of Sodom to rescue righteous Lot from its fiery doom.
You see, they came down also not to just destroy Sodom, which is said earlier, but also to rescue. Okay, continuing.
A guardian angel is appointed to every follower of Christ. These heavenly watchers shield the righteous from the power of the wicked one. This Satan himself recognized when he said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made an hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Job 1, 9 and 10. The agency by which God protects his people is presented in the words of the psalmist. The angel of the Lord encampeth around about them that fear him and delivereth them.
And I kind of added this here one and the next one as a promise to the people at the end of the time about the heavenly watchers shielding the righteous from the power of the wicked one. See, this has not stopped, and it will continue to go on. But we must not intervene and try to do things that it is God's job. Now, going to Daniel, here, let me read this. Let the heart be changed from man's, and let the beast heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers and the demand of the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth it up over the basest or the lowest of men. See, it's God that sets up these leaders, not us. It's God to do that. When people write legislation, it is God. We have to not intervene and try to change. We have to let things go as God sees fit. We have to put all of these things, these are God's covenants, not ours.
Right.
And I'll let you read into that the way you want. Okay, continuing.
Sarah, with the first and the only true wife of Abraham, she was entitled to rights as a wife and mother, which no other could have in the family. She reverenced her husband, calling him Lord, but she was jealous lest his affection should be divided with Hagar. God did not rebuke Sarah for the course she pursued. Abraham was reproved by the angels for distrusting God's power, which had led him to take Hagar as his wife and to think that through her the promise would be fulfilled.
And you see, it comes right back to Abraham. Abraham did not follow the covenant that God told him. He was the head of the household. And but he's going to get another chance, as we will see very soon here. See, they're both, you go back then, and a woman, what her desire was is provide a son and daughter for their husband. And all that would be to get the affections of their husband. Let's see here. Okay.
Again, the Lord saw fit to test the faith of Abraham by a most fearful trial. If he had endured the first test and had patiently waited for the promise to be fulfilled in Sarah, and had not taken Hagar as his wife, he would not have been subjected to the closest test that was ever required of man. The Lord bid Abraham, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee unto the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of.
And that there is from Mrs. White. So now you see why when Abraham took Isaac to offer, now you know why that had to be done. Continuing.
The command of God was calculated to spare the death of his foes. Take now, take now thy son. Then, as though to probe the heart a little deeper, he adds, thine only son whom thou lovest. That is the only son of promise, and offer him as a burnt offering.
See here, he tells him that it's Isaac. He's his only son of promise. But your other son will recognize and have a great nations after him too. But it's all going to be about Isaac, from the free woman. Continuing.
3 days his father traveled with his son, having sufficient time to reason and doubt God if he was disposed to doubt. But he did not distrust God. He did not now reason that the promise would be fulfilled through Ishmael, for God plainly told him that through Isaac should the promise be fulfilled. Abraham believed that Isaac was the son of promise. He also believed that God meant just what he said when he bid him to go offer him as a burnt offering. He staggered not at the promise of God, but believed that God, who had in his providence given Sarah a son in her old age, and who had required him to take that son's life, could also give life again and bring up Isaac from the dead.
So when Abraham went up there, he was actually ready to kill Isaac. And you see what doubt does to our life if we doubt. Sarah's an old woman. That can't be fulfilled. And then we try to intervene. See, that it's never has a good outcome. And this is the end of it. And this is my message for today. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus Christ. And if we do that, we won't have some of those problems that Abraham had.
Amen.
Just think, we wouldn't have the problems either if Abraham had obeyed.
Yeah.
That's right.
We wouldn't have that wild mule we have today, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Not mentioning any names.